Okay, the reading is taken from the book of Daniel. It's chapter 3, verses 4 to 6, 8 to 9, and 12 to 30. So it is quite a long one. Sorry if you've not got a copy already. It's on page 854 of the Bibles that are scattered around the church. The herald proclaimed aloud, "You are commanded, O peoples, nations, and languages, that when you hear the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, drum, an entire musical ensemble, you are to fall down and worship the golden statue that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Whoever does not fall down and worship shall immediately be thrown into the furnace of blazing fire." Accordingly, at this time, certain Chaldeans came forward and denounced the Jews. They said to King Nebuchadnezzar, "O king, live forever. There are certain Jews whom you have appointed over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These pay no heed to you, O king. They do not serve your gods and do not worship the golden statue that you have set up." Then Nebuchadnezzar, in a furious rage, commanded that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be brought in. So they brought these men before the king. Nebuchadnezzar said to them, "Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods, and you do not worship the golden statue that I have set up? Now if you are ready when you hear the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, drum, an entire musical ensemble, to fall down and worship the statue that I have made, well and good. But if you do not worship, you shall immediately be thrown into the furnace of blazing fire. And who is the God that will deliver you out of my hands?" Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered the king, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to present a defense to you in this matter. If our God, who we serve, is able to deliver us from the furnace of blazing fire and out of your hand, O king, let him deliver us. But if not, be it known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods, and we will not worship the golden statue that you have set up." Nebuchadnezzar was so filled with rage that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that his face was distorted. He ordered the furnace be heated up to 7 times more than was customary, and ordered some of the strongest guards in his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and throw them into the furnace of blazing fire. So the men were bound, still wearing their tunics, their trousers, their hats, and other garments, and they were thrown into the furnace of blazing fire. Because the king's command was urgent and the furnace was so overheated, the raging flames killed the men who lifted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. But the 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down, bound into the furnace of blazing fire. Then King Nebuchadnezzar was astonished and rose up quickly. He said to his counselors, "Was it not 3 men that we threw in, bound into the fire?" They answered the king, "True, O king," he replied, "but I see 4 men unbound, walking in the middle of the fire, and they are not hurt, and the 4th has the appearance of a god." Nebuchadnezzar then approached the door of the furnace of blazing fire and said, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out, come here." So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out from the fire. And the satraps, the prefects, the governors, and the king's counselors gathered together and saw that the fire had not had any power over the bodies of those men. The hair of their heads was not singed, their tunics were not harmed, and not even the smell of fire came from them. Nebuchadnezzar said, "Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and delivered his servants who trusted in him." They disobeyed the king's command and yielded up their bodies rather than serve and worship any god except their own. Therefore, I make a decree. Any people, nation, or language that utters blasphemy against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be torn limb from limb, and their houses laid in ruins, for there is no other God who is able to deliver in this way. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. This is the word of the Lord.
Wow, Andrew, for length of reading and difficulty of names, I think that's right up there. Well done. Now we're going to have a think. This is one of, you may or may not have heard it before, one of the most famous stories in the Old Testament, in the Bible. We're going to have a think about what it might mean to us today. And I'm going to need some young helpers to help me do this. First, we've got a bit of TV to watch. So you might want to come and sit at the front here so you get a good view. And then I'm going to need some helpers. And in an act of totally unashamed bribery, I've got some jammy dodgers to give away to whoever's going to help me. So if you come and sit at the front, sit at the front, sit at the front. Okay. So this story, quite a long story as we've just heard, is a story about 3 young men, probably teenagers, who were very brave. They'd been carted off to a foreign country where there was a very evil king. Can you make an evil face at me? Okay, called Nebuchadnezzar. And we are going to hear the story again, this time told through the medium, because we're in 2018, of emojis. So I hope you can see the screen. And we're going to see the emoji version of this story in 3 minutes. Are you ready? Let's go.
This is the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, 3 guys who stood up for what they believed in with boldness. A long time ago in the land of Babylon, there lived a king named Nebuchadnezzar. He wasn't really a good king. In fact, he did some pretty wicked stuff. Like, one day, the king decided to build this massive gold statue of himself so everyone would think he was super awesome. And this statue was huge. It was 90 feet tall and covered in gold. Talk about an ego. Then the king decided to throw a huge party, for himself, of course, and invited everyone in the kingdom to attend. People came from far and wide until there was a massive crowd that surrounded the giant statue. Then the king's messenger told the crowd, "Attention, everyone! When you hear the music play, fall to your knees and worship the statue of the king. If you don't fall to your knees and worship the statue, you'll be thrown into a fiery furnace." Just then, the band started to play. Music filled the air, and right on cue, everyone in the crowd fell to their knees and worshipped the statue. Well, almost everyone. In the middle of the thousands of kneeling people stood 3 men named Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. When the king saw that these men weren't kneeling like everyone else, he was mad. I'm talking like super mad. He ordered his guards to grab the men and bring them to him. "Why aren't you kneeling?" growled the king. "I command you to kneel and worship my super awesome statue." But Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego boldly said, "We serve the one true God, and we will only worship him." This made King Nebuchadnezzar even angrier. He pointed at the men and said, "I'll give you one more chance. Bow down and worship me, or you will be thrown into a fiery furnace." People all around them were whispering, "Just bow down. Come on, guys, it's not a big deal." But they didn't back down. They were filled with boldness. They looked the king in the eyes and said, "We will not bow. We will only worship the one true God." The king was furious. He immediately ordered the furnace to be made 7 times hotter than it already was. The guards tied up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and dragged them to the furnace entrance. The fire was so hot that when the door was opened, the guards next to it instantly burst into flames and died. Yikes! So some replacement guards ran up and they pushed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego into the furnace. The crowd gasped as the men disappeared into the massive fire. But then, something amazing happened. Through the flames, everyone could see that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were still standing. But not only that, there was a 4th person standing in the furnace. It was an angel sent from God. King Nebuchadnezzar stood up, amazed at what he was seeing. He ran to the furnace door and called out, "Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, come out of the furnace! Your God has saved you!" They walked out of the furnace without even one hair on their heads being burned. They didn't even smell like smoke. The king was so amazed by what God did, he totally changed his mind and promoted them to be some of his right-hand men. That day, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego stood up for what they believed in with boldness. And because they did, God saved them from the fiery furnace. The end.
So there is the story. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego stood up for what they believed in, and so God saved them from the fiery furnace. Right, this is where I need a little bit of help, because I want us to think. Samuel, I'm going to invite you up, because you did the best impression of evil King Nebuchadnezzar. I'd like you to go and stand up in the pulpit there. Take a microphone with you. Okay, and now I need a Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So, would you like to come up? Yeah, you go. And who else shall I choose? Would you like to come up? Yeah. Well done. And would you like to come up? Okay, so can you just tell me your names? James. Aniela. Ollie. Well, James, Aniela, and Ollie, you are now, for the next 5 minutes, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And the evil King Nebuchadnezzar is about to shout to you, "Worship my awesome statue."
Worship my awesome statue.
Okay, this is what happened. He's scary, isn't he? And there was a big statue put up in the land. We don't know what it was, but people think it might even have been Nebuchadnezzar himself. I mean, wow, that is an ego, isn't it? You know? Not even Cristiano Ronaldo would do that, would he? So we have the big statue, and everyone's being told to worship him. Now, I wonder, the statue may have been King Nebuchadnezzar, but in our lives, you know, we all worship something, don't we? We're all living for something. We all give something first priority in our lives. Maybe, I don't know what it is for you. Maybe it's your work, maybe it's your friends, maybe it's money, maybe it's trying to stay safe, maybe it's going on holiday. I don't know. What is the most important thing in your life? But Nebuchadnezzar was saying, I want you to make me the most important thing in your life. And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego said, no. You heard the story. Well done. They said, no, we're not going to do that. And so the evil King Nebuchadnezzar said, I'm going to throw you in the fire.
I'm going to throw you in the fire.
Woo. Now that's scary. I expect you've changed your minds, haven't you? Because that is, no. And so he said, I'm giving you one last chance.
I'm giving you one last chance.
And then they said, no. Amazing. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego then prayed what I think is one of the best prayers in the whole of the Bible. They said this, our God is powerful enough to save us from the flames. But even if he doesn't, we will not worship any other God. I think that is an amazing prayer. I've heard that prayed by people who are near death, who have prayed, God is able to save me from dying, but even if he doesn't, I will not worship any other God. And so in this fable, this famous fable of the fiery furnace, I'm going to use a lot of F's now, and the famous fable of the fiery furnace, can you say that?
Famous fable of the fiery furnace.
We find faith. Very good. In the famous fable of the fiery furnace, we find faith. That's our first F. And then we find fire. Now, I don't know about you, but my guess is this. When Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego prayed that God might save them, they probably thought that he would do something, if he was going to, before they actually made it to the mouth of the furnace. But actually, God did not deliver them from the flames. He saved them in the flames. They ended up in the furnace because King Nebuchadnezzar said, throw them into the furnace.
Throw them into the furnace.
So in you come. This is going to be our furnace. And you other guys, you want all the flames. So shuffle forward, and with your hands you have to make lots of flames and make them as hot as you can. Okay, up on the steps. And so they went into the furnace, and they must have thought, well, God can't save me now. And this stands for the flames that happen in our lives. I don't know if any of you have been in a situation and thought, well, that's it. Nothing can save me now. Maybe you've met someone, I've met lots of people who said, I used to believe in God, and then this happened, and now I can't believe in him anymore. Well, God's way is often to let us go into the flames and then to appear in there with us. And if we don't understand that about God, we miss a lot of what God does in our lives, because these three friends were thrown into the fire and the flames were going very, very hot. Well, quite hot. And then, what did they see? A fourth person appeared in the flames. And who was it? Do you remember? An angel of God who kept them safe even in the flames. And this is the experience of Christians throughout the ages. God doesn't stop us from going into the flames. But in the flames, we find him right there with us. Isaiah, who was a near contemporary of these people, wrote, when you walk through the waters, you will not be drowned. When you walk through the fire, the flame will not set you alight. It's a promise from God, not to keep us out of the flames, but to be in there with us. So in the famous fable of the fiery furnace, we find faith, we find flames, and we find freedom. Because the end of the story is that the 4 people survived the fire, and then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego walked out of the flames, and they were not even a hair of their head was singed. They didn't even smell of smoke, and they were so well they could even floss. That's not in the original story, I just added that bit in. And then Nebuchadnezzar said, I will worship your God.
I will worship your God.
So you see, because of the faith in the flames, not only did Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego find freedom, but God found fame in Babylon. It's an amazing story, isn't it? And my question for each one of you is, do you want freedom? We all go through times when our lives feel like they're on fire, don't we? When difficult things are happening at school, at home, in relationships, at work. Do you want freedom? Well, if you do, all you have to do is pray with faith. God is able to save me from these flames. Jesus himself prayed something very similar. In the garden before he died, he prayed, Father, if it's possible, take this cup of suffering, meaning his death, take this cup of suffering from me, but not my will, but yours be done. And Jesus discovered in his furnace, which was the cross, that although he might have felt forsaken, his Father never faltered and was there for him. And on the 3rd day, he rose from the grave. God promises never to leave us or forsake us. When we walk through the fire, we will not be burned. And so I pray for all of you and for myself, that as we walk through the fire of difficult times, we would know God with us. Let's close our eyes and pray for a moment now. Maybe you want to imagine in your mind that any flames in your life at the moment. Maybe someone said something that's hurt you. Maybe you're struggling with a difficult situation at home or at work or at school. We remember people from this church who were going through the flames, Simon Fry and David Clark in hospital, both of them in London. We remember others like Gabrielle, one of our vicars, who's had a brain clot. We think of others and name them silently in our hearts, who we love, who are going through difficult times. Father, give us faith to reach out to you in the midst of the flames, to find your favor and your love. Give us courage to reach out to you, even if it's something we're not used to doing, and to discover your help. Thank you that in Jesus you have shown us the way. Help us to trust you and to worship no other God. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Well, I'd like you to give a round of applause to my helpers here. And I hope you like Jammy Dodgers. Do you like Jammy Dodgers? Good. Well, you may come and receive your payment. Oh, if I can get the packet open. So thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you. Andy, there's one for you. Do you think the evil King Nebuchadnezzar should get one? Oh, you don't like that? Okay. If you give that one to Nebuchadnezzar, Barnaby, if you go to the back, I think there's a different biscuit you could have back there. Wonderful. Thank you, guys.